A horse that was once a legend now lies collapsed in the snow, like a body no one stayed behind to bury. The lights are gone. The stage is gone. So is the name that once made thousands rise to their feet. Only one thing remains. A faint, uneven breath, as if death forgot to finish what it started. And then, a cat appeared. Not to rescue, not to help, but to reach into what was left of a soul and touch something humans had long buried: the will to survive. At the same moment, a man returned to the place he once left everything behind. He was the one who led this horse into the spotlight, and he was the one who left it behind when the flames rose. Three beings: a blind horse, a silent cat, and a man broken by war, met again in a world frozen white, quiet as a grave, and brutal beyond reason. There were no miracles, no voices raised, only one touch, one look, one breath, and from that, life began again. This is not just a story about rebirth. It is a question. Can a soul that was once abandoned choose to live again? Gallop of Glory invites you on a journey you will never forget. Starting now. Only the souls that have fallen to the bottom can still hear the call of life. In absolute silence. The storm gave no warning. It came suddenly, like a sentence handed down from the sky. Cold, white, unforgiving. The wind didn't howl. It wept. Long, hollow cries, like a funeral trumpet echoing across an abandoned world. And the snow didn't fall. It descended, like knives, tearing through the air, carving silence into something that hurt. Down in the valley, buried under memory and snow, stood what remained of an old stable, half its roof gone, its walls peeling like the skin of something long forgotten. And beside one of those walls lay Cairo, still, collapsed, no longer resisting. No one remembered his name anymore. But once, it had meant something bright, something powerful, something alive. Cairo wasn't born for the wild. He didn't grow up chasing wind through the mountains. He was born in a barn with air conditioning, fed by formula, trained not by ropes or fear, but by glances and the soft flick of leather. From the very beginning, he heard more organ music than the sound of another horse's hoof. He was chosen for how straight he stood, how gracefully he moved, how his neck curved like silk in motion. His trainer used to say, "This one doesn't need the whip, just a look." He performed in Reno, in Sacramento, even Texas. But it was Texas, where the fireworks didn't rise. They turned and came down, right into his face. He didn't remember the blast, only the screams, the pounding hooves, and a man's voice whispering SHHH, while pressing his head down. When he opened his eyes, there was no light, just gray. And then, nothing at all. They called it an accident. But for Cairo, it was the moment the world disappeared. He was no longer valuable. He was sent away to a place meant to be temporary. But temporary became forever. They used to call it a ranch. Up north, past the ridges of Colorado. Now, they don't call it anything. There are no people, no cars, no gas stations, no dogs barking, no chickens crowing, just snow that never melts, and jagged stone rising from the plains, like the teeth of something that never sleeps. The wind here doesn't sing. It scratches. It groans. It clanks chains together, like a ghost pacing in its own cage. This place is not for the living. It's where people send the things they don't want to bury, but also don't want to see. Cairo still breathed, but he had been erased. Once, he was a miracle. Now, he was a memory no one claimed. Humans don't always need bullets to kill. Sometimes, they just walk away. He lay there now, in the white nothingness, where there was no light, no sound, only wind and breath. Barely. The world that once knew music and crowds was gone. Now, all that remained was his chest rising and falling. Too slow. Too shallow. He didn't call out anymore. He no longer listened for footsteps. Every time he tried to stand, his legs folded beneath him. The same legs that once danced in front of thousands. Now, bone beneath skin, spirit somewhere else. His back still bore the scars. Patches of fur burned away, never regrown. No one had come for him. Not a human. Not even a scavenger. Except a pair of eyes. Cairo didn't see it. Couldn't. Didn't even feel it at first. Something watching from the broken rafters. Or maybe from behind the snow-crusted rocks beyond the fence line. But he didn't care. Because he was waiting. Not to be saved. But to vanish. Not from cold. Not from hunger. But from the simple truth. There was no reason left to take another step. And then, in the stillness, a sound. Not wind. Not footsteps. Not even alive, exactly. Just a scratch. A single scrape. Against rusted metal. Tiny. Meaningless. Except that in this dead world, it was everything. Cairo didn't move, but his ear twitched. Reflex? Ghost memory? Or something ancient, buried deep inside the bones of what he once was? No one knows. But that night, his breath, though faint, was still visible in the air. Still there. Not gone yet. Not finished. Not yet. Night 60. Since the blizzard swallowed bitter wind, there was no moon. The sky had been clawed into ragged shadows, as if even the night was being torn apart by cold. The whole world drowned in a borderless gray. Only the wind, and a faint breath, rising from somewhere deep beneath the snow. Cairo still lay by the cracked wooden wall, unmoving, his body stiff like an old tree trunk, too stubborn to rot. But tonight, something had changed. Not the snow, not the wind. A gaze. From above, through the broken rooftop, a pair of eyes watched him. Two quiet glimmers, unblinking, like small flames burning without sound. Cairo couldn't see it, but somehow, one drooping ear flinched. Not from noise, from something deeper. Some instinct. Not quite dead. A presence. Close. Wordless. Invisible. But real. Mira. A calico cat. A long, scorched scar ran down her back. Like a memory burned into her fur. She didn't move. Didn't meow. Didn't blink. She just sat there. Still as a statue. Watching. No one knew where Mira came from. But if you'd lived in the western woods last year, you'd remember the fire. The one that burned down 3 lumber camps, silenced the forest, and sent everything living into exile. Mira survived. She lost her litter, lost her shelter, lost her voice. Since then, she made no sound, left no trail, spoke to no one. People said calico cats were omens. Mira wasn't. She was just what remained after humans lit a match and walked away. She didn't approach. She didn't interfere. She only observed, night after night, as the world slipped deeper under snow. Mira stayed on that beam, a silent witness, watching a creature that had forgotten how to dream. It wasn't pity. It wasn't empathy. Those things had burned to ash, alongside the straw where her kittens once slept. But still, something in Cairo's stillness held Mira there. Maybe he wasn't fully gone. Or maybe Mira needed a reason not to vanish. So, on night 70, she began to act. Cairo still didn't move, still didn't lift his head. But when dawn broke, a pale, false light bleeding over bitter wind, there it was, a blade of grass. Not snow, not ice, not even fresh, but real, dry, carrying the smell of earth, right by Cairo's front hoof. He didn't eat it, didn't understand, but his nose twitched. The next night, a shallow puddle, in a rusted tin can, left behind by some forgotten summer. No footprints led to it. No signs showed how it got there. Mira didn't wait to see what happened. She just did it. Not because she trusted. Not because she hoped. Because something inside her moved. The third night, a wild herb, pungent and sharp, rested beneath Cairo's muzzle. This time, he opened his mouth, not out of hunger, but because, for the first time, what he smelled didn't belong to death. His ear flicked again, then stilled, and in that moment, no wind passed through his coat, only breath, not his, close, and a feeling unnamed. Someone still remembers that I exist. Mira kept returning. No sound, no touch. A few blades of grass, a can of water, a silent vigil from the rooftop. She wasn't watching a horse. She was watching a soul, fighting not to disappear. Mira had seen death, in animals, in people, in the glowing skeletons of houses. But in Cairo's broken breaths, There was resistance. She didn't believe in rescue. But she stayed. Night 90. The wind eased. Snow fell soft. No sound. But 2 breaths. Cairo still lay there. But his head tilted. Not toward the wind, but toward a pulse. Mira stepped closer, 3 paces. Still no sound. Cairo didn't turn, but his ears fell lower. Not in fear, in surrender. To quiet. That wasn't empty anymore. Mira sat longer than usual. Left nothing behind. Just presence. Near dawn, she touched his front hoof. 1 paw. 1 second. Then pulled back. Quick. Unsure. But real. Cairo didn't flinch. But his blind eyes widened. He couldn't see her. But he felt her. A living body. Touching his own. He breathed. Deep. Rough. Then lay still again. But this time, his head didn't fall. Day 100. The sky wasn't bright yet. The wind was soft. Mira came again. Water. And a sprig of mint-scented green. Cairo tried. 1 leg. Wobbling. But he didn't fall. Mira said nothing. Did nothing. Just looked. 10 seconds. 2 legs. Then he bent his neck. And ate. Not for hunger. But because, for once, he wasn't afraid of what waited. When he looked up, that evening, the wind whispered over the ruins. Cairo stood. Mira rested beside him. No words. No movement. Not from weakness, but because life doesn't shout when it knows it belongs. For the first time, Cairo didn't feel alone. No footsteps. No whips. No circus lights. Only 1 breath. And another. Steady. Alive. Remaining. Mira didn't save Cairo. Cairo didn't save Mira. But they stayed. Together. Night 101. Bitter wind lay wrapped in silence. Thick as wool thrown over a grave. No wind. No snow. Just stillness. Mira sat no more than 10 steps from Cairo. On the thin snow from last night. Her paws left no mark. Her tricolored eyes caught a dim glow. From a sky with no stars. No moon. Only shadow. She didn't move. She didn't blink. But she was alive. And in this deadened world, that was rare enough. Cairo didn't stir. His breath still present. But everything else had stopped. Food sat untouched. Water beside him. But nothing changed. Like life itself had stepped back, waiting for death to finish its work. Then Mira moved. Not away. Not up to deliver another gift of grass or water. No, this time, she stood. Lightly. As if her body were made of breath. She took 3 steps. Didn't meow. Didn't look at Cairo. She simply lifted 1 paw. And reached out. Scratch, scratch. Her claws touched the edge of a rusted crate. Not loud. Just a whisper of sound. But in a world so thick with silence, It was like thunder cracking eternal ice. Cairo didn't lift his head, but his ear twitched. Just a little. It was the first time in weeks he responded to anything that wasn't sent. Mira took one more step, came close to his ear, the one that had been limp for days. And then, meow. Just once. Soft. Hoarse. So faint it nearly broke before it finished. A voice. Not for command. Not even for comfort. Just a signal. You're not alone. Cairo didn't react with his body. But inside, something shifted. Something beat. Maybe a heart. Maybe a memory. Mira stepped back, leaving nothing but a vibration in the air. A presence. Real. Undeniable. Night 102. Cairo didn't sleep. Not because he was awake, but because sleep, breath, waiting, and dying had all become the same thing. But tonight, Mira did something new again. She approached silently, as always. But this time, she passed beside him. Her tail brushed his shoulder. A soft sweep, like spring air in a place that forgot what warmth was. Then, scratch. The soft tapping of claw on wood again. This time, Cairo moved. His front leg, long curled and lifeless, twitched, then stretched forward. Not a step, just a lean toward sound. Mira didn't look back, didn't wait. She simply crossed the stall and sat, still as a period at the end of a sentence. And Cairo, after moments of stillness, moved the other leg. Not steady, not quick, but he didn't fall. His whole body shook, like dry grass in winter wind. But his ears pointed toward Mira. Not light, not memory. Sound. And somehow, that was enough. Mira didn't know why she did it. She had once forgotten hope, forgotten her own voice, lived through fire, lost everything, and chose to exist like a ghost. No one named. But when Cairo took his third step, she stayed. She meowed again, soft, toward the end of the stall. Cairo turned his head, didn't see, but listened, because that sound wasn't a command. It was a reminder. Life doesn't need light, just one point of contact. Then Mira stepped on an empty can. Clang. A sound echoed. Metal against rock. A note carried through white silence. She kept walking, and the can scraped with her. Cairo followed. Slow. Unsteady. But forward. Toward the sound. No more lying in wait for death. He walked. Tobias Harper never meant to return to bitter wind. They say, war survivors don't go back. But Tobias had no more war, no future, and his past had been whittled away by white pills and broken dreams. They called it combat-induced memory loss. He called it, I'm no longer me. But that winter, he drove back. Old truck, familiar dirt road, empty barn, no explanation, just a pull. And then he saw them, In the valley, a scarred cat, leading, and behind her, a horse, so thin he looked like a shadow, drawn in snow, following the clinking of the can. No reins, no handler, no command. Tobias froze, then whispered, "Cairo?" And the horse stopped. The air stopped. The world waited. Cairo couldn't see, but his ears rose. A name, not just a sound, but a memory that once meant existence. Tobias stepped closer, heart pounding like something was trying to re-enter him through the cracks. He said, "You were the horse I cared for." Cairo took another step, not toward food, not toward safety, toward that voice. Mira turned, not running, not judging, just watching. Tobias reached out his hand. Mira sniffed, then brushed her cheek into his palm. A single touch, enough to break open every locked door. Behind him, Cairo approached. No command, no halter, no fear. He touched Tobias's shoulder with his muzzle, gentle, deliberate. And Tobias, for the first time in years, wept. That night, they didn't speak. They didn't move. Just breathed. Together. And for the first time in 100 nights, Cairo wasn't alone. Tobias wasn't broken. Mira didn't disappear. Only silence remained. But this silence was different. It was full. The next morning, bitter wind was still gray. No sunlight. Just a faint wash of ash-colored light, spreading across memory. Tobias woke before dawn. Not because he couldn't sleep, but because, for once, his dream wasn't a nightmare. In that dream, Cairo wasn't tied. No fireworks. No circus lights. Only open land. And the sound of a small bell leading the way. He stepped outside. The barn was still broken, but Cairo stood, a little hunched, but upright. Mira sat next to him, eyes wide open, as if she had kept watch for both their souls. All night long, Tobias didn't bring hay, didn't raise a rope, didn't speak. He simply stepped back, one pace. Mira glanced at him, then turned her head. Scratch. Her claw on the old iron barrel. A sound, just enough to split the morning silence, like the first light cracking through fog. Cairo raised his head. He saw nothing, but he heard. Mira walked. Not straight this time. She veered westward, toward the edge of the valley, where the snow thinned and the earth softened. Cairo hesitated. Tobias didn't push, didn't ask. He just nodded, and Cairo followed. Steps slow. Each one left a deep print, but none of them collapsed. Mira didn't turn to check. Every few feet, she scraped the ground. Once, a rhythm, not loud, not urgent, just enough to say, "There's still something ahead." Tobias came last. A man who once trained hundreds of horses, now walking behind a cat. Not because he'd lost control, but because he understood. Sometimes, life doesn't need a leader, only the freedom to find its way. 3 souls. One once burned, one once forgotten, one once erased. Now walking through snow, with no destination, but not lost. Every time Mira paused near fallen stones, she circled. Cairo waited. Tobias learned not to rush. Just one quiet breath after another. By noon of the 3rd day, they reached a hollow. Cross Hollow, the place locals whispered about, where memory forks the road. Tobias stopped. He remembered. This was where the circus once camped, where Cairo's last show ended, in smoke and screams. To the left, a burned steel frame, where the stands once stood. A pine tree, split down its middle, like a wound left open too long. And in the center, a shallow ring in the snow, where the stage once rose. Tobias said nothing, but Cairo did. He stopped. No command, no signal, just stillness. Neck lifted, as if sensing something beneath the snow that no one else could see. A sharp exhale, not from cold, not from pain, from recognition. Then, a sound broke loose, a short, ragged neigh. Not clean, not proud, not stage-worthy, but raw and real. It tore through the sky and echoed like a heartbeat, returning from the past. And then, from beyond the hill, another sound. Hoofs. Then more. A herd. Tobias raised his head. Wild mustangs. No harness. No owner. No fence. Their leader, a pale ashen mare, with a mane like wind-blown grass, stepped forward. 20 paces away. They stopped. Didn't run. Didn't flee. Just stood and watched. Cairo didn't retreat. He stood taller, ears high, still blind, but steady. Tobias whispered, "They're waiting for you to decide." Mira stood between them, not with the herd, not with the man, but on the invisible line, where the past meets what's next. Cairo breathed deep and stepped forward. One step, then another. No falter, no fear. He didn't look back. And Mira, for the first time, turned and walked away. No pause, no goodbye, only silence. Tobias stayed behind, still as stone, watching. The air grew quieter, as if even time itself was holding its breath. For a little longer, Cairo entered the herd. No protest, no welcome, just acceptance. Like a branch, burned and broken, laid gently among roots that never forgot. But then, Tobias blinked, and Mira was gone. No paw prints, no final sound, Not even a shadow in the snow. Just a fading patch of warmth where she had once curled beside Cairo. Suddenly, a hollow opened in his chest. No cat, no guide, only wind. But this wind wasn't violent. It whispered, and it pulled him back. Not to the valley, but to another time. A memory. The heat of Iraq. The grit of sand in his mouth. His ears ringing. From a nearby blast. He had fallen. Half buried. Half dead. And through the blur, a dog. Wounded. Bleeding. Still crawling. Just to press its body against his. And keep him alive. Tobias lived. The dog didn't. And from that moment on, he went silent. Couldn't speak. When he heard scratching at a door. Couldn't face the yellow circus lights. Couldn't forgive the feeling of someone leaving without goodbye. Just like now, Mira had vanished. Not stolen, not taken. She had simply finished what she came to do and left. Tobias took 2 steps back, sat down in the snow, didn't cry. Men with scars that deep rarely cry. They shake gently, like a frozen lake, touched by memory. And then, hoof steps, soft, measured. Cairo. He had left the herd and walked toward Tobias. Stopped. Didn't neigh. Didn't bow. Didn't touch. He just stood. The wind shifted, pushing Cairo's scent toward the man who had once led him into fire and once left him behind. Tobias looked up. His voice cracked into a whisper. "You remember me?" Cairo said nothing, but lifted a front hoof, pressed it into the snow. A quiet thud, soft, but deep enough to echo through the years Tobias had lost. 1 beat, then 2. Nothing more. Just that. As if saying, "I'm still here." And I remember. That night, Tobias didn't build a shelter. He leaned against Cairo's side. In the open. No fire. No fear. Just warmth. And breath. No voices. No music. No applause. Only 2 living beings. Choosing to stay. Not because they feared being alone, but because they finally weren't. Mira, the first sound that led Cairo out of death, had vanished. Like nature's whisper. Never loud, but never forgotten. Cairo walked again. Not for show. Not for orders. But because he chose to. Tobias, who once lost memory, and reason, and the right to feel, now touched life through a language without words. Not a climax that explodes, but a silence that echoes forever. Night 112. No warnings. No forecasts. Yet, the sky over Bitterwind had changed. Tobias felt it, before his eyes confirmed it. A strange wind. Not sharp. Not fierce. Just heavy. as if the air was carrying damp sand and memories. He was on the roof, repairing the stable, using old boards salvaged from the barn, hands trembling, nails bending, sweat pouring down, even though it was well below freezing. But Tobias didn't stop. Not for the horse, not for guilt, but because he had never, not once, rebuilt something he had watched fall apart. Across the valley, Cairo stood, pressed against the dirt wall. Mira lay curled beneath a patchwork blanket, stitched together from old burlap sacks. The wind began to howl. No snow yet, but the echoes from the mountains sounded like twisted steel under pressure. Tobias looked up, and for the first time in years, his heart didn't pound from fear, but from something deeper. A warning. Something was coming. Not wind, not cold, but the final test. For those who were still undecided about living. Midnight. The snow began to fall like blades. Not flurries, but walls of white. A thick, dense curtain, swallowing every direction. Cairo collapsed again. Mira clung to his chest. Her cries, small, broken, helpless, were lost inside the storm. They were only a few hundred meters away, but felt erased from the world. The wind reversed course. Sound couldn't travel. Tobias turned on his flashlight, but the beam vanished into the sponge-white abyss. He shouted. No one heard. He ran, but each step sank thigh-deep into the snow. Then, a whinny. Cut short. He couldn't tell from where. He couldn't tell if it was pain or a cry for help. And then, Tobias screamed. For the first time since the war. Cairo. No response. Just the wind, stealing his voice, and mocking him with silence. Tobias fell. Not from cold, but from the one thing worse than cold. Panic. Old panic. The kind buried for years, now exploding like a mine under snow. His chest locked up. His hands jerked uncontrollably. And the visions came back. Desert. Comrades. Lying still in the sand. He had screamed back then. No one answered. And now, Cairo and Mira were being buried, too. Just like before. Again? He roared at the sky. Am I losing everything, again? He howled. Like a wounded animal. There was no logic. No calm. Just fear. And instinct. And fire. Then, a flicker. Tiny. Like a spark in a cave. Flickering again. Tobias opened his eyes. Through the storm. Beyond the rocks. A faint yellow glow. Not a flare. Not a lamp. But the soft light of industrial rescue wire. From somewhere. Mira had found it. She had bitten through the insulation. Wedged the wire into a crevice. A stupid thing to do. A painful thing to do. But she did it. So Tobias could see. No more thinking. No more hesitation. Tobias stood. Legs shaking. Face burning from the cold. He ran. Didn't look. Didn't pray. Didn't measure his chances. He ran toward the light. toward a cat, scarred by fire, who had chosen to trade her pain for a chance to call back a man who once walked away. Tobias nearly collapsed again when he saw Cairo. The horse lay on his side, half buried in a snow hollow, still, frozen, blind eyes wide, not from vision, but from despair so deep it made the body forget how to close. Mira was no longer perched on his back. Instead, a small smear of blood on the glowing wire. Tobias didn't hesitate. He dove forward, wrapped a rope, one he almost threw away last summer, around Cairo's neck. Get up. The horse didn't move. Legs twisted, body ice cold. No, no, not again. Tobias roared, and this time, he didn't care who heard him. He screamed, everything he had never screamed in 10 years. He pulled Cairo, dragged him, foot by foot, toward the remains of the stable. He wasn't strong enough, but pain didn't stop him. Not tonight. He dragged, because this time, he refused to let another life go. The storm kept howling. The wind split through the broken walls. Mira lay still, her heartbeat thin as thread. One paw burned, singed from electricity. Tobias laid blankets over both. Then, with bloodied hands, he rebuilt the roof. Not for beauty, not for shelter, just to stop the wind from stealing what little life was left. Each nail pounded was another breath through clenched teeth. I can rebuild. I will rebuild. No one slept. Tobias sat between horse and cat, hunched over, trying to warm them both with just his breath. The storm raged outside, wailing like ghosts left behind in a burning circus. But inside, there was no fear, no sound, only life, barely hanging on. Mira wheezed. Cairo twitched, his body still caught between death and a nightmare. Tobias just breathed, and with each breath, he made a promise. Tomorrow morning, if we're still here, I won't disappear again. The storm passed, but the sky didn't clear. Only a slash of red, like blood, cut across the valley. Tobias opened his eyes. His back ached. His lips cracked. But he moved. And in front of him, Cairo stood. Not strong, not tall, but standing. One leg lifted, ears forward, facing the stable door. Mira hadn't woken. Tobias bent down, pressed his fingers to her chest. The heart was still there, faint, slow, but beating. No, not yet. His voice cracked. Tears dripped onto the snow and melted into her fur. He lifted her, cradled her in his lap, and wept loudly. For the first time since coming back from war, he lit the oil stove, trying to warm her body. And that's when it all came back. Gasoline, fire, burning hair, The day the circus caught fire. He had unfastened Cairo's harness. He had also run, left the horse behind. In the smoke. "I burned you," he whispered, but couldn't look. Cairo didn't understand words, but he stepped closer, lowered his head, rested it against Tobias's shoulder. Not to answer, just to say, "I know." Dawn, but no sun, only a dull glow, like lamplight behind a gray curtain. Tobias wrapped Mira in the thickest coat he had. She curled up, like a newborn left at someone's doorstep, still breathing, still here, eyes closed, but alive. Cairo stood nearby, head low, ears pointed, listening to every breath, as if afraid that breath might be the last. Tobias sat still, not because he was tired, but because, for the first time, he wasn't afraid of silence. He touched a beam, still damp with blood, looked up, and saw Cairo watching him, not with eyes, but with presence. "You're still here," Tobias whispered. "So am I." Then, he picked Mira up, hands shaking, back aching, and stepped outside the stable. For the first time since the war, with the posture of a man who had stopped running. Cairo followed. No rope, no words, just steps behind the man who once abandoned him, but returned. They didn't walk far, just past the stable. The wind was still cold, the snow still deep, but something had changed. No more chasing ghosts, no more thunder in the ears, no more war, only breath, footsteps, life. Tobias knelt near a low mound, where he could see the entire valley. He placed Mira in his lap. She stirred, a thin breath, like silk. Then, she opened her eyes. 3 colors reflected the mist of morning. No cry, no meow, just a gaze. And Tobias whispered, not to her, not to Cairo, but maybe to the silence itself. "I thought I'd died in the war, but maybe I just hadn't been called back yet." Cairo stood behind him, one leg still limping, but head high, ears turning toward the sound of a wind chime, the one Tobias had hung on the stable when he was a boy. It rang softly, like an invitation from a world that never forgets. And for the first time, no screams, no rage, no flares, only a promise, reborn in silence. Spring came, not with flowers, not with warmth, but with fewer nights of frost. The storm had passed, but it left behind a silence deeper than snow. The kind of silence that asks, "Now what?" Tobias didn't ask. He worked, not with plans, not with speeches, but with his bare hands. Planks, nails, dirt under fingernails. He didn't rebuild the stable. He reinvented it. No longer a place to keep things inside, but a place to let pain out. A place where broken creatures could breathe again. Cairo carried Timber on his back, one leg still stiff, but he moved, as if he understood. Mira limped between the beams, one paw still healing, but sometimes she leapt onto a roof beam and stared into the distance, as if waiting for the next soul in need. No signs, no cameras, no hashtags, just wood, just earth, just straw, and quiet. 3 lives, not resurrected by miracles, but by the simple, stubborn act of staying. Whispers began to spread about a place in the hills where a blind horse lived, with a man who didn't speak, and a scarred cat who slept by the door. No address, no promotion. But then, a letter arrived from a clinic in Billings. Just 5 words, handwritten. Can she walk with him? No backstory, no diagnosis. But Tobias understood. 3 days later, a truck pulled up. Inside, a girl, maybe 8, eyes open, but blank, not empty, just somewhere else. Her name was Lucia. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just existed, as if she'd been waiting for something that hadn't yet called her name. Tobias asked no questions, made no promises. He simply handed her a soft leather strap tied to a chain of silver bells and clipped it gently to Myra's collar. Lucia didn't know how to ride, didn't know how to lead, but the bells sang. With every step Mira took, they chimed, soft, clear, alive. And behind her, Cairo walked, slow, steady, a shadow, a guide. Lucia followed them both, one hand resting on Cairo's shoulder. No words, no instructions, just sound and breath and warmth. Day after day, one path, one loop, and each time, Lucia's hand drifted lower, closer to Cairo's neck, until one morning, she pressed her cheek to his mane and whispered something. No one heard what, but Cairo stopped, as if he had. He didn't build this place to save anyone. He still woke from nightmares, still touched the scars on Cairo's skin and flinched, still reached for Mira in the dark, just to feel. This wasn't all, just imagined. But every morning, he boiled water, fed them both, changed Lucia's blanket, cleaned out the straw, and carved 3 words into the wooden sign by the gate. No questions needed. This wasn't a rescue center. It was a graveyard for grief that refused to bury the living. One morning, the frost didn't return. The wind changed, and the light turned gold. Not warm, not loud, just Steady. Lucia stepped outside. Barefoot. Didn't flinch. Didn't wait. She walked toward the hill. Mira was already there. Tail twitching. The bells. Still and silent. Until Cairo joined. Then, chime, chime, chime. 3 silhouettes. In perfect rhythm. Not toward a stage. Not toward a crowd. Just forward. Because something inside them whispered, "Go." Tobias didn't plan it. Didn't even realize the date. But when he looked up and saw them crossing the hill, he forgot how to breathe. Lucia, in white, hair catching wind, one hand on Cairo, one step at a time. Mira led them. The bells rang, just enough. Cairo's steps, perfectly timed. And the sun, for the first time in bitter wind, paused. Tobias stepped outside. Didn't wave. Didn't follow. He just stood there and watched as 3 souls that should never have survived etched a silent ritual in light and shadow. No choir. No applause. Just wind. Just bells. And a rhythm so pure, it made words unnecessary. That night, Lucia slept in the hay. Mira curled against her back. Cairo stood guard by the door. And Tobias lit the oil lamp. He didn't cry. Didn't smile. He just whispered, "I never thought I'd be part of something good again." And outside, the bells chimed. Once, then fell silent, like the final punctuation mark on a sentence. Life was still. Writing. No fireworks. No applause. Only 3 souls, once burned, buried, and forgotten, now walking side by side in silence. Not to return to where they came from. Not to start over. But simply to prove one thing. You don't need to be saved to deserve to keep living. You just need someone to remember you're still here. And if you're listening to this story on a quiet night, somewhere inside the noise of the world, know this. Out there, somewhere, there are creatures still fighting for every single breath, just to stay. Gallop of Glory doesn't just bring you stories about horses. It brings you whispers from the souls who once got lost and chose to come back. Don't forget, we tell 2 stories like this every day. If you want to listen, stay. Subscribe so you won't miss the next breath.